Ready
Hair
for,
and makeup?
I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille. Okay. Fine. So, we are doing the final installment of this rather short series, two-part series, the Passover you've been passing over, the hidden Passover. And tonight's topic is the very end of the Seder, for most people anyway, and it's Chad Gadya. Chad Gadya means one kid goat. For those of you who have endurance, who try to stay up till the end of the Seder, it's a very popular song. And for most people, I'd say 90% of Passover celebrants, and this includes those who've had the benefit of a yeshiva education, it doesn't go much past that. It's a catchy tune. I've heard it on website. One website described as the Jewish equivalent of Old MacDonald Had a Farm. You know. And there's no question that on the surface, and the way it's illustrated in many Haggadahs, it probably is something that piques the children's interest, which is a very essential part of the Seder. I'm not going to poo-poo it. But you know, there's something fascinating about Judaism, and that is that in most disciplines, you have classes, or you have, I wouldn't say classes, you have texts, you have subject matter that's suitable for beginners, and then intermediates, and then advanced, and then get to the scholars, and the graduate students, and the doctoral candidates, and finally the professors, and the high-level intelligentsia. Okay, you don't expect a Nobel Prize-winning mathematician to be working on multiplication tables. But when it comes to the Torah, you can have a 6-year-old child in Cheder and Talmud Torah, whatever, learning Chumash and Rashi, learning the Bible, and the basic classic commentary Rashi. And yet, you can have Rav Moshe Feinstein, for example, one of the greatest halachic minds of the last 150 years, and he will do a Shlaim Mikra V'Echa Targum, he will do his weekly review of the weekly Torah portion, and he'll study the Chumash, and he'll review the Rashi, and he's studying the same texts as the 6-year-old, the youngest beginner. And that's the way it goes in Torah. You never really graduate out of a certain text, but your appreciation of it and your maturity, your understanding of it hopefully matures. My Rosh Yeshiva Zatzal Footner used to say that Bava Kama was his weakest Masech, his weakest tractate of the Talmud was Bava Kama. And his students asked him why. He said, because that was the first one I learned. And I have a very immature understanding of it. There was that first impression when my mind was still very childish. That's how I grasped it the first time, and having a hard time transcending that and maturing my youthful exposure to it. At any rate, we're all adults here. The Jewish Heritage Center is about adult education. So we decided tonight we're going to save the comments for the end. So, even though, like I said, this is very, in a certain sense, very playful ending for the Seder, it's the kind of thing that you almost use as a lollipop, a carrot, not a stick, to keep the little kids up till the end of the Seder if they can endure it. Nevertheless, that's just the most external and most superficial understanding of it. The truth of the matter is, as I researched a little bit more in preparation for this class, it seems to have been composed by early Ashkenazic Kabbalists. I want to share with you something that the Chidah writes in a responsum. The Chidah, who was a great Sephardic scholar, was asked, somebody sent him a letter, that he heard somebody mocking this tune, this little ditty, as most of us understand, the Chad Gadya, the one kid goat. And the person was saying, you know, it's ridiculous. You have in particular, there's a guy apparently who lived in Italy or in Amsterdam, one of the Sephardic strongholds of the time, and he was mocking the Russian and the Polish Jews. He said, these people are crazy, you know, you just had a long Seder, it's a tiring Yontif, and you know, they're engaging in this thing that, you know, it's like Old MacDonald Had a Farm. That's how you top off the Seder. It's this exalted evening with all these mitzvahs that we're performing, with all these beautiful customs, and then you top it off with something that's childish and foolish and ridiculous. Anyway, somebody took exception and got up, and basically, without getting into the halachic minutiae of it, cursed this fellow out. And the question was, did the guy overreact or did he do the right thing? And the Chidah says as follows, among other things, without getting into what he answered him, whether the guy who criticized the one mocking the Chad Gadya Zogers, Chad Gadya reciters, if he was right or if he was wrong, he writes among other things as follows. We all know the incredible holiness of the liturgical poetry of Ashkenaz. Ashkenaz is the cradle of Germany, was the cradle of what we call Ashkenazic Jewry today. And he says all of those poems that to the casual reader, to the casual observer, may not seem like too much more than just, rhyme zone, doggerel rhyme. He said all of those things are founded on the Chachma Amitis, by the true wisdom, by the true wisdom that's a euphemism for Kabbalah, for Jewish mysticism. As was testified to by one of the great expositors of Jewish mysticism, no lesser a personage than the Arizal, the holy Ari of Schwartz. And he says that the Rokeach wrote that all the piyutim, all the liturgical poetry is, if you want to know the etymology of the word Kabbalah, everyone likes Kabbalah, with the red strings, with the hamzas. What does the word Kabbalah mean? Anyone know Hebrew enough to know what Kabbalah means? Right. So it says it's Kabbalah ish mipi ish, the Rokeach writes. It's received wisdom. It's only if you're in the chain of transmission. It's not something you can just pick up a book and read it casually. It's something that was passed by adepts at Jewish mysticism through the generations in a chain linking us back to Sinai, one generation after the other. That's where the poetry comes from. Okay, I'm not a Kabbalist, and I'm not here to share Kabbalistic secrets, but I do want to share with you tonight what some of the great commentaries have to say about Chad Gadya, and hopefully we'll have a more meaningful end of our Seder in particular, and in general, maybe we'll have more of a sense of awe of not just the Torah itself, but even our liturgy and our poetry, how dense it is, how laden it is with encrypted, if you will, the Torah messages. Okay. Before we talk about Chad Gadya, let's talk a little bit about the structure of the Seder and where it appears in the Seder. First of all, so let's talk a baseline meaning, a definition of a word. You ask any modern day Israeli, how you doing? What do they answer? No, that's religion. I want to know how you doing.
Fine, thank you.
Okay, that's what you say. What does an Israeli say?
Thank God.
Beseder. Beseder. Manishma, manyanim. How are you? What's new? And they'll answer beseder or beseder gamur. Okay, completely in order. Okay, and that's a translation of the idiom of the Russian and Yiddish-speaking Jews who created modern Hebrew. An old-time European Jew, you asked him, "V'smachman, how you doing?" Usually the answer would be, if the guy was not in a bad mood, "in besten Ordnung." The best order. Everything is orderly. Okay, no, its idea is that chaos is not good. Chaos is trouble. When things are out of control, when things are chaotic, when you can't make rhyme or reason out of anything, those are bad times. When things are orderly and systematic and you're making sense out of your life, those are the good times. Okay, that seems to be the Jewish sensibility. And as the Maharal of Prague pointed out, the reason why Jews throughout the ages have called the family service that we do the night of Passover as a Seder is a nay vote against the conventional wisdom of what miracles are about. First and foremost, we're celebrating the miraculous. The night of Passover, we're celebrating the miraculous. All right? So, lest anyone think that a miracle means a rupture, something just haphazard, as it were, that God did on a whim, okay? This is a repudiation of that. No. What happened with Geulas Mitzrayim, what happened with the Exodus from Egypt is a Seder. It was orderly, it was preordained, it was planned, but there can be a higher order and a lower order. Sometimes the higher order, the miraculous order, superimposes itself on the order that we call nature. But nothing's out of order here. Nothing is not as it should be. Everything is orderly. Okay? So, and the Seder itself is also very orderly. It's scripted. Okay? Maybe some of you know a little song. A lot of Rishonim, a lot of medieval Jewish commentaries gave simanim. They were called signs, mnemonics, ways of remembering the order of the Seder, when to drink the cups, and when to eat the bitter herb, and when to ingest the matzah, and so on and so forth. But the most popular one, the one that stuck, most people say attribute it to the Tosafos, the French Talmudic commentaries of the medieval era. And that goes with a little sing-song. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. Kadesh urchatz, karpas yachatz, magid rachza, motzi matzah, marar karech shulchan arech, Safu Barech Halel Nirtza. That's printed in almost every Haggadah, and there are a lot of them. Almost every Haggadah I've ever seen has the order of the Seder in that way. And many people have the custom, before each step of the Seder, either they themselves will say out loud, okay, now we're up to Kadesh, now we're up to Urchatz. They'll usually ask a kid sitting around the table, what does Kadesh mean? What did you learn in school? What did they teach you in Cheder? What did they teach you in Yeshiva, Talmud Torah, whatever, and so on. So everything is orderly and everything is in a Seder. And the very last step of the Seder is something that we call Nirtza. Nirtza is a conjugation of the word in Hebrew that means goodwill. Ratzon means will. Okay? Nirtza means we have achieved goodwill. It's the passive voice. Right? We've achieved goodwill. So Rabbi Eliyahu Kitov, in his Haggadah, makes a beautiful parallel in the steps of the Seder. He says if you run through the steps of the Seder, you will find that there are 15 steps to the Seder. And the 15 steps to the Seder correspond to the 15 thank yous that we express to God in the song Dayenu. Okay? Dayenu, Dayenu. Everyone knows that song, right? Okay, we're doing a little musical program tonight as well, right? I'm singing all the songs. Don't shoot me, but I don't know the traditional tune. I always mess up the traditional tune for Chad Gadya. My father, Zechron Levracha, never sang it. He just said it. When I got married, my wife started singing it, and now I'm totally mixed up. I don't know whether to say it or to sing it. I'm usually drunk from the 4 cups of wine by that point, and I'm mumbling in any event. Be that as it may. Nirtza, the 15th and last step of the Seder, corresponds to the thank you that we give God in the Dayenu. The last thank you, for those of you recall, I didn't distribute Haggadahs tonight, but trust me on this one. Ubana kama malos tos aleinu, how many beautiful good favors did God bestow upon us? And the last one is Shabana lonu es beis habechira. He built for us the chosen house, meaning the temple in Jerusalem. And the temple in Jerusalem is first and foremost about rapprochement, about achieving goodwill with God. We bring offerings over there. Some are atonement sacrifices. Some of them are just, most of them, the lion's share, just goodwill sacrifices. And even the atonement, we've gotten it so to speak alienated from God, and now we're making up. So it's all about achieving goodwill. Okay? So just as in the Dayenu prayer, the 15th is about Ratzon, is about achieving goodwill, so too these post-grace after meals, post-Hallel, Pizmonim, these little liturgical songs that we're singing at the very end of the Seder, is we've done our good deeds, we've done a tremendous amount of mitzvahs. I challenge anyone to find one night, or even one day, other than Pesach, in the Jewish calendar, where so many mitzvahs are performed and packed into such a small amount of time. It's a tremendous night of serving God. We don't think of it that way. We think of it as it's a convivial family meal. It's a get-together. It's a reunion. Serving God, that's something I do in synagogue. It's something I do in temple. It's not that way. It's not the seat of Jewish holiness is the Jewish home, not necessarily the synagogue. So it's a tremendously exalted evening, and we've achieved this goodwill, and now we're expressing it through these songs. Okay, so that's just in the order of the order. Where does this fit in? That's where it fits in. And again, it's the very last thing, so one would think it's kind of the crescendo of the whole Seder service. More than a cool-down exercise. Okay, these are already the mop, we did the main stuff, and that's how many people, I confess, in my own home, half of my kids are asleep already by the time we get to Chad Gadya. I don't know if they're really so tired or they're just they're trying to get out of post Seder cleanup, But be that as it may, that's how many people, most families, the main thing we did our mitzvahs, we ate our bitter herb, we ate our matzah, we drank our cups of wine. These are already just optional. These are just mop-up exercises. Okay? It's hard to change, ingrained habits, but again, according to my research, that's not how we should look at the Nirtza part of the Seder, and certainly not the Chad Gadya, which, as I said, seems to be the crescendo. When you get to the 15th, in Jewish thought, when you're talking about the 15th, you're talking about a full moon. Maybe after that, after the 15th of the month, the moon begins to wane. But from 1 through 15, it's waxing. It's going up and up and up. Okay. Fine. So first, let's just run through the steps of the Chad Gadya. Okay? So let's work our way backwards. Look on the back of the page, verse 10. And let's see how many actors are, I'm sure you've read it already. If you haven't read it before tonight, you had time to look at the handout. Let's look at how many killers, how many aggressors there are in this chain of aggression. Okay? Verse 10, okay, from line 34. One little goat. Okay, then came the holy, blessed be he. Holy one, blessed be he. So that's 1. Smote the angel of death. That's 2. Slew the slaughterer. That's 3. Killed the ox. 4. Drank the water. 5. Extinguished the fire. 6. Burned the stick. 7. Beat the dog. 8. Bit the cat. 9. And ate the goat. 10. Okay? So there are 10 steps in this sequence of aggression that the last man standing is not a man at all. The last man standing is God himself, so to speak. The Holy Blessed One comes and smites the angel of death, and that's the end of it. Okay, so let's just hold that in mind. Let's know that there are 10 steps. B, let's try to remember the order. It's easiest. It's a very repetitive song. It keeps on moving forward, but going backwards, reminiscing all the prior steps. But I think it's easiest if we just work with this last verse, verse 10, lines 34 through 41. That way we've got it all in front of us. Okay, so what's the symbolism? Obviously there's an allegory. Okay? If you want to understand it just on an overt, literal level, it reads like a Jewish Old MacDonald had a farm or a Grimm's fairy tale. Obviously there's symbolism here, it's an allegorical tale. What's the allegory? Great commentaries have agreed to disagree about that. But I'm going to try to share a few of them with you. Let's start with the Vilna Gaon. Yeah. The Vilna Gaon's Hakdama is preface to the whole thing of Chad Gadya, and it gives it some kind of a context. I mean, why are we reading Chad Gadya on Pesach? It seems so playful, it seems so, almost comical. Maybe it's for Purim, Why not on Hanukkah? Why not some other Jewish holiday? What does it fit into Pesach altogether? All right? So we're saving comments and questions for the end tonight. So, this is what he says. Basically, in a very loose way, we have to understand that Pesach, we're celebrating our national birthday. Right? We weren't really a nation. We weren't really a cohesive nation until the Exodus from Egypt. Famous imagery of the Chumash itself, of the Bible itself. God says to the nation that left Egypt and made the Exodus, says, "Oh hanisa Elokim lo v'lokachas lo gai mikerav gai." Did God ever before attempt to take out one nation from the midst of another nation? That's the baseline meaning of that verse. But our sages interpret it to mean Kerev in Hebrew can mean from the middle of, or Kerev can mean from the innards, from the internal organs of. And it says it's like a shepherd birthing a calf. A shepherd will literally thrust his hand into the womb of the mother cow and pull the calf out through the birth canal to birth the calf. This was literally an act of birthing for the Jewish people. As long as they were slaves, as long as they were subsumed, as long as they were under the thumb of culturally under Egyptian civilization and socioeconomically as slaves under masters, they were chattel. They weren't individually, they weren't human beings, and certainly on a national level, they had no identity. They were part and parcel of Egypt. They were a machine working for the Egyptian empire. When they made the Exodus, when they got out of Egypt, now you have a Klal Yisrael. Now you have a nation. So, when somebody is born, it's appropriate to thank the parents, as it were, to look towards our parents. So, the Vilna Gaon starts off by saying, we have to understand that everything that we have as a people, culturally, spiritually, probably even physically, everything that we have goes back to our patriarchs and matriarchs. So the story of Chad Gadya, per the Vilna Gaon, begins with the last of the patriarchs, with Yaakov Avinu, with Jacob. Now let me show you where it begins. Take a look. I'll tell you on which page in a moment. Take a look on page 125. And before I read you the passage, I want to remind you of something that anyone who's been coming to Rabbi Turk's Bible for Beginners, or some of my classes, knows this already, but for those of you who may be here for the first time and never heard this before, allow me to reiterate it. We have to understand something about our relationship between the patriarchs and the matriarchs and the balance of Jewish history. And that's best formulated by the aphorism of Nachmanides of the Ramban, Ma'asa Avos Simul Abanim. The deeds, the lives of the patriarchs and the matriarchs are signs for the children. Meaning, the patterns of Jewish history are established by the patriarchs and the matriarchs. Right? Sometimes it's a little bit subtextual, it's ephemeral, it's hard to see the correlation between the lives, the events in the lives of the patriarchs and the matriarchs and the balance of Jewish history. And sometimes it's very overt. We know what the Akedah, we know what the binding of Isaac means to the balance of Jewish and human history. I mean, just to give it a little bit of resonance, it says in the Medrash that the left horn of that ram that was substituted for Isaac was the ram horn that was blasted at Mount Sinai at the giving of the Torah, and the right horn of the ram is the one that's going to announce the Messianic era. We always pray on that day, let there be a mighty ram's horn blast, shofar blast. That's where the shofar is going to come from. So an event in the life of two patriarchs, Abraham and Isaac, results in the two most momentous events in the balance of Jewish history, the beginning of the Torah and the beginning of the Messianic era. Should be speedily in our days. Okay? And here's another one. Sometimes, like an event like that, it's in these two monumental occasions. Sometimes things that the patriarchs and matriarchs did accrue to particular mitzvahs. They result in particular mitzvahs. Right? Abraham came back from the war against the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah. He lifted up his hand in a solemn oath and he said, I will not take anything from the booty, from a strap to a thread. And our sages say, in the merit of his not wanting to enrich himself that way, we have the mitzvahs of tefillin, of phylacteries, that we do with leather straps, and tzitzis, the fringes on our four-corner garments, that we do with threads. Okay? Now check this out. Page 125. And we're looking at we're going to start from verse 6. Okay? All right, you want to read for us? Start from verse 6. I'll tell you when to stop. 125.
Rebekah said to her son Jacob, I just heard your father speaking to your brother Esau. He said, bring me some game and prepare it into something tasty. I will eat it and bless you in God's presence before I die. Now, my son, listen to me. Heed my instructions carefully. Go to the sheep and take 2 choice young kids. I will prepare them with a tasty recipe, just the way your father likes them. You must then bring them to your father so that he will eat it and bless you before he dies.
Stop. Okay, I think we've read enough over here. Okay, for those of you not familiar, let me just flush this out a little bit. The last of the patriarchs, Jacob, Yaakov was born with an evil twin brother, Esau. He purchased the birthright from him. Esau was the older of the two brothers. They were twins. Esau was the older. He had purchased the birthright. And now he's going to steal, use subterfuge. Okay, it's a good question, but it's a topic for another series of classes. He got the blessings this way, and the blessings also validated the birthright. Okay? What does his mother tell him to do? Bring me two, what kind of animals? Kids. You ever wonder why in this prayer, this poem, one little goat, why are we being so repetitive? One little goat, finished. It's two little goats. Chad gadya. We don't say, came a cat, came a stick. You know, this is not for people with a stutter over here. Why only the kid is repeated twice? Says the Vilna Gaon, these are the two kids that we're talking about. It's exactly the same word. For those who are not familiar, the original here, although it's printed in Hebrew letters, the language is Aramaic. So Gadya, Chad Gadya in Aramaic is Gedi in Hebrew. Okay? Bring for me two Gedian, the Hebrew reads. Okay? I then read it for us in English. I'll read for you the Hebrew. Kach li misham shnei gedoyei izin. Okay? That's the plural possessive. Gedi is singular, Gediyim is plural, Gedoyei is plural possessive. Two kid goats. According to rabbinical tradition, this event was happening on Passover. And it's because, lest you think that there's something dirty or underhanded or something that we want to cover up for the balance of our history, that our ancestor, did something sneaky or shady or underhanded, it's brought from the sages, the Talmud and the Medrash, that we merited forevermore throughout history to two offerings that we give to God every year on Passover. The Passover sacrifice, the Karban Pesach as it's known, and the Karban Chagiga. For those of you who don't know the sacrificial service in the temple, maybe you know it from your Seder plate. The shank bone and the roasted egg. The shank bone is supposed to represent the Passover sacrifice, the roasted egg, the Karban Chagiga, the holiday sacrifice that was brought on Passover as well, attendant to the Passover sacrifice. That is in the merit of these two goats. Says the Vilna Gaon, Chad gadya, one little goat is really two little goats, right? And the two little goats are talking about the two goats that Yaakov Avinu brought, and in a certain sense became personified with. Remember, he put the skin of the goats on his arms in order to get the blessings and in order to validate the birthright. Okay? So, whoops, I have the wrong piece of notes there. Okay, so these are the two goats that Yaakov Avinu brought for Yitzchak, and it was on the night of Passover. And that's how he got the blessings. Okay, now, let's talk about something that Talmudic imagery and world civilization actually has in common. Think of some adjectives for people who are very envious, or people very jealous. How do we describe them? What's an envious person, a jealous person? What's another, like a competitive kind of jealous person?
Angry sometimes.
Okay, angry. Anything else?
Needy.
Bitter.
How about catty? You ever heard the expression catty? Okay, for some reason in world civilization and in the Talmudic folklore as well, cats are associated with two midos, two character traits. One very admirable and one not so admirable. The admirable one is they're supposed to be the most modest of animals. Talmud says that had the Torah never been given at Sinai, people would learn how to be modest and discreet from cats. Okay? Whether talking about the elimination of wastes or reproduction, it seems that cats do it in hiding. They're not out in the open. But also the Gemara says cats are very jealous creatures, and unlike dogs that are man's best friend, they don't recognize a master, they only recognize a house. and that also has to do with the idea of it's all about me, it's all about, where's my next, Purina's cat chow coming from? It's all about their own advancement. So cats are catty. Okay. So, the Vilna Gaon goes on to say as follows. What happened with the merit of those two goats? What's the next generation? Yaakov gets it from Esav, and then what happens to it? Who gets the birthright and the blessing after Yaakov? Joseph, correct. Okay? What did Joseph suffer from? What was he a victim of? Jealousy. Okay? The cat that ate the two goats were the brothers that sold Joseph into slavery. And which country did they sell him into slavery to? Okay, you get to see the connection to Passover night. It's not so overt. But when you realize that the event with Yaakov and Yitzchak happened on Passover night, and when you understand that the whole descent into Egypt in the first place happened as a result of the cattiness of the brothers of Joseph, now you understand why this is a segue to the Seder a little bit more. Okay. Who's the dog? The dog is the Pharaoh of Egypt. I'm not familiar with the source where I saw this commentary from the Vilna Gaon does not bring the Talmudic source, but he says that there is a source in the Talmud where Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, is referred to as a dog. Okay? Now I saw in another book, something I don't know if we're going to get to Rabbi Heller's interpretation tonight, if we're going to have enough time, but he fleshes it out a little bit more. You talk about negative and positive attributes of various animals. One of the negative attributes, one of the most gory, if you will, of all imageries of King Solomon in Mishlei, in the Proverbs, is he says, "Kekelev shav al kayai, ken ksil shana bivalte." A fool who repeats their transgression, who goes back to their sins, the simile, the metaphor for that is a dog. Okay, now again, this is not the United States of America in the year 2008, where many dogs have a better diet than human beings in third world countries. This is dogs for most of human history, where you have these starving curs with the ribs sticking out, running through the streets, looking for a scrap. But at any rate, it seems that in ancient times, certainly in biblical times, it was not unusual for sick, mad dogs to vomit and then to feed on their own vomit. Well, that's the stark imagery. Somebody who repeats their sin, a fool who repeats their sin, is like a dog ingesting his own vomit. Now, if I wanted a poster boy for a fool repeating his sin, who would that be? Pharaoh of Egypt. Okay? Not only is he repeating the sin, but he's getting punished for the sin. Most sinners would say, if God would just hit me once with a lightning bolt, would I be a saint? Okay? If they don't know, Rabbi Feinstein or the Chavetz Chaim, I would be Mother Teresa. But I'd be good. I just want to see reward and punishment, right? Here's a guy who gets hit again and again and again, and he just keeps on going back for more. Right? The Energizer bunny of sin, or the Energizer dog of sin, if you will. Right? And when I was a kid, there used to be a Timex commercial. They would show a Timex watch falling into the river and getting run over by a bulldozer. Takes a licking and keeps on. Okay.
That's the fair.
Yeah, the Kotzker Rebbe used to say. He says, "I admire Paro's backbone." The guy was a man. The guy could take a lick. God hit him with his best shot, and he just kept on coming back for more. Even before God removed his free will from him, the first 4 or 5 times it was of his own volition. Okay, so whether you admire him for being a tough son of a gun, whether you think he's a stupid idiot who's just not getting the message, the bottom line is the dog imagery. According to Rabbi Heller, I'm just fleshing out a little bit what the Vilna Gaon says. That's the king of Egypt. The king of Egypt is the proverbial dog who regurgitates his vomit, who repeats his sin, doesn't learn a lesson. But the bottom line was, he got the cats. He got the 12 tribes and their descendants, and he bit them. By putting them into slavery, he bit them. Okay, the next one should be pretty easy. Okay? Let's work backwards, okay? 39 and 38, line 38 and 39. A stick beat the dog. What's the imagery of the stick? If the dog is Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, what is the imagery of the stick that beats him?
Moses.
Yeah, Charlton Heston, the tzaddik, was just nifta last week. We all remember, right? Holding out the staff. All of it. If we don't know it from Chumash, we know it from like I said, from Cecil B. DeMille. The miracles of Egypt were done with a staff. Okay, it wasn't literally that he took his stick and knocked the dog over the head as one would with a mad dog, but in a certain sense, metaphysically, that's exactly what was happening. The plague, the word for plague in Hebrew is, what are they called? Makos is plural. What's the singular? Makkah. You know what makkah means? To hit something is a makkah. Okay? Lahakot means to hit. Okay? He struck them. He hit them 10 times. It was 10 hits, no misses. That God's 10 greatest hits. You know, those were the miracles of Egypt. Okay, so that one's pretty easy. The staff is Moses' staff. What's the fire? No, we're alternating here between victories and losses, so to speak, for the Jewish people, right? The 2 goats are good. Okay, the fire here is, it's not fair. This one, the imagery is a little bit too vague. The fire over here is the fire of the inclination to evil, and in particular, the inclination to evil that derives from idol worship. Okay, basically, all that Moses did was a build-up towards the building of the first temple by Solomon. Okay, Jewish history was going. I'm not saying there weren't some dips, there weren't some setbacks, but generally speaking, we were in a growth curve. Remember before I spoke to you about that 15 in Jewish ideology represents the middle of the month when the moon is full. Okay, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, was the 15th generation of Jews, starting from the patriarchs. If you go through it, you'll find out that he was number 15. So we were waxing. We were still on a growth curve. And the first temple was destroyed because of the 3 cardinal sins, and it seems the paramount cardinal sin for which it was destroyed was avodah zarah, was idol worship, and that's represented by fire. Humble me, I think this may have something to do, or maybe I saw this in a super commentary on the Vilna Gaon. I think this may have something to do with the fact that the golden calf was something that extruded from fire. They had a smelting pot, they burned things, and that's where the golden calf came out of. So, whatever the stick achieved, the fire of idol worship destroyed. That's the next step. Now this is very fascinating. Torah has a lot of metaphors scattered throughout the Bible. The Torah itself has a lot of different metaphors to describe the Torah. But one of the most beautiful metaphors for Torah is water. As water is life-giving and life-sustaining, so is Torah. Torah is called water, our sages tell us, just as water always goes from high ground to low ground, so too the Torah begins in heaven, but goes to the humblest of people. It was given on a little hill, it wasn't given on Mount Kilimanjaro or Mount Everest, it was supposed to be a humble mountain. Moses was the humblest of men, and so it goes. The humble people are the ones who achieve the greatest in terms of Torah scholarship. So Torah is compared to water. On a literal level, the imagery works. Water, there's almost like a game of scissors, right? Scissor, what's it called, that kid's game? Right? Scissor, rock, paper, right? Right? So, however it goes, right? At any rate, water does extinguish fire. But he's saying another incredible thing over here. And again, some of you who've been to my other class, I'm sure have heard this before. Our sages tell us that in the times of the Anshe Knesset Agdol, the men of the Great Assembly, if you're a student of the evolution of rabbinic scholarship, basically before there was Mishnah, okay, in between the period when prophecy ended, when the biblical canon, when the last of the biblical books ended, and the first of the oral Torah, the Mishnah, was committed to writing by Tanaim, those scholars and leaders of the Jewish people who lived during that period were known as the Anshe Knesset Agdola, the men of the Great Assembly. They're responsible for our baseline liturgy, our Shemona Esrei, our prayers come from them. They're famous for a lot of things. But one of the things that they're most famous for is they prayed to God that this Yetzer Hara, this inclination to evil for worshiping idols, should be extinguished. There's a very famous passage in the Gemara. One of the most wicked kings of Israel was a fellow by the name of Menashe. And a Talmudic sage was criticizing Menashe. What a fool that man must have been. You know, you're sacrificing your firstborn to something called Molech. You're looking for Beelzebub for advice. You prostrate yourself to a 3-inch copper figurine. What kind of fools were these people? And the king Menashe appears to this guy in a dream, and he says, don't be so full of yourself. Had you lived in my era, you would have lifted up your rabbinical frock coat, and you would have been running ahead of me to the temple of Beelzebub or one of the other idols at the time. You can't begin to understand. My Rosh Yeshiva Zatzal used to say, we talk about one of the features of the Messianic era is the end of all Yetzirah, the end of all inclination to evil. He says, if you want to know what our lust and what our greed and what our avarice and what our jealousy is going to be like in the Messianic era, try to imagine how much of a yen you have now to fall down on the floor before a 3-inch copper figurine. That's how much all of these things are going to mean to you once Mashiach comes. Right? So that's something they accomplished. The Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, who were the bearers of the Torah, the water carriers, if you will, they extinguished the fire. Not coincidentally, that's when prophecy ended. It was a trade-off. God said, in order to keep the balance of human free will in balance, if I'm going to eliminate that inclination to evil, to worship idols, I also have to eliminate my direct communications with human beings known as prophecy. That's when prophecy ended. But they felt the trade was worth it, so to speak. At any rate, back to Chad Gadya, that's how it works. The water extinguishes the fire. That's the men of the great assembly that are symbolized as the bearers of Torah, of water. They extinguish the fire of Avodah Zarah. What's the Torah? What's the ox? The ox is the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire is compared to an ox, and I have to be very frank with you. I'm not going to try to snarl you. This came to me as a little bit of a surprise, because I'm always conditioned to the Roman Empire being compared to a pig, to a swine. Now, seriously, that's the famous pasuk in the Psalms in Tehillim. Yechasemenu kechazir miyar. You ever hear the Yiddish expression? Maybe some of you had a Yiddish-speaking Bobby. The chazafisel, the pig's foot. Pig's foot is the symbol in Judaism of hypocrisy, because the pig is the only animal that's got the external sign of a kosher animal. It has a true cloven hoof, but the internal sign is missing. It's not a ruminant. It doesn't really chew its cud. Right? So that's the imagery that I'm always used to. At any rate, I'll take his word for it. That somewhere in a passage of the Talmud and Medrash I'm not familiar with, the Roman Empire is compared to an ox. Who's the slaughterer? Who slaughters the ox? The Messiah. But not the Messiah that you're familiar with, and maybe you're not even aware of this idea in Jewish eschatology. We actually have two Messiahs. We have Mashiach ben Yosef, and we have Mashiach ben Dovid. So I have to give you a quick little lesson in Jewish history over here. The beginning of the end for the Jewish people, and there's really kind of a cohesion of the end of this poem with the beginning of the poem, is disunity. Okay, when there's jealousy, when there's not friendly competition, but when there's murderous and malicious competition among Jews, that's really the greatest of our woes, and that's the paradigm for that is the competition between Joseph and his brothers. As things turned out, much later in Jewish history, there was a civil war, there was a schism, and the Jews divided into two different kingdoms. There was a northern kingdom composed of 10 tribes, and there was a southern kingdom known as Judea, composed of 2 tribes. Okay? You ever heard of the 10 lost tribes? That's the whole northern kingdom. An Assyrian warlord called Sancherib came, and they were sent into exile earlier than the rest of the Jews, and their ultimate fate is one of the great historical mysteries nobody knows. All extant, all identifiable Jews in the world today, of course, every 2 weeks, some other tribe in Tibet or Africa comes up and says, oh, we're the Danites, we're the Asherites, and so on and so forth. But identifiable Jews in the world today are either from the tribe of Judah, of Benjamin, those are the tribes of the southern kingdom, or Levi, who was scattered throughout both kingdoms. Remember a moment ago I told you about a wicked king, Menashe? He was not king of Judea, he was a king of Israel. He was king of the northern kingdom. Most of the kings of the northern kingdom came from one of Joseph's 2 sub-tribes, Ephraim. When the prophet wants to talk about the Messianic era of the ultimate peace among the Jewish people, he talks about writing on two sticks, on one stick the name Judah, and on another stick the name Ephraim, and putting the two sticks together, and that's supposed to represent the rapprochement, the coming together of this schism that happened between Joseph and his brothers and between the two Jewish kingdoms. So it's not too shocking that if Mashiach, if the Messiah is viewed as a king of the Jews, that there should actually be two kings, because when we first went into exile, that's how we went into exile. It's two separate kingdoms. At any rate, there are two different roles of the two Messiahs, and tonight's not a class really on Jewish eschatology, on the Messianic era. But to make a long story very short, Mashiach ben Yosef, the Messiah, the son of Joseph, is the warrior king, and Mashiach ben Dovid, Messiah, the son of David, is the peacemaking king. At any rate, this shochet, this slaughterer who slaughters the ox, is the first Mashiach that's going to slaughter all the anti-Semites of the world, represented by the Roman Empire. We look at it as most of Western civilization as a direct line going from the Roman Empire. The Malach HaMavis is the Malach HaMavis, starring as himself. Okay, there's no allegory over here. Malach HaMavis, the angel of death. Okay? Smote the angel of death. The angel of death is the angel of death. We would think a messianic figure ushering in an era of the ultimately the end of Jewish eschatology, something we call the resurrection of the dead. Right? So we would think that Mashiach might be immune. He's not immune. One of the things, again, it's a lot of Jewish mysticism and Jewish eschatology here, but this Mashiach ben Yosef is supposed to die in battle, and thus dashing the hopes, in a certain sense, of many Jews who believed, okay, we thought this was it, we thought this was the final redemption, and look, our hero, came home on a shield. He was killed in battle. So the Malach HaMavis is going to kill Mashiach ben Yosef, and ultimately God conquers all. God conquers death. You have to understand what that means, slaying death. Slaying death means the resurrection of the dead. It means there will not be death. And as fantastical and as out of our experiential framework as that sounds, let's take a look. Let's not forget that human history is supposed to come full circle. Take a look. You have your Chumashim there. Page 9.
Page 9.
Page 9. Okay, very simply again, verse 15, without making a longer Megillah out of it. God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and watch it. God gave man the commandment, a commandment saying, you may definitely eat from every tree of the garden, but from the tree of knowledge of good and evil do not eat, for on the day you eat from it you will definitely die. That means plan A was for man to be an immortal. Man was not supposed to die. Don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil and you will not die. Right? So that's the ultimate in human history. That's how the story, the happy ending of all happy endings is supposed to end. God slays the angel of death. There's no more death. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to try to make it very quick. I'm going to try to do one more very quickly. This one is from a Haggadah called Mas Nisim, who, if I'm not mistaken, the author of that Haggadah was Rabbi Yaakov of Lisa, a 17th century Polish sage. He says as follows: Chad Gadya, one goat, he says, is the imagery here is the Beis HaMikdash. As it says, now don't open your Chumashim, open up your Sidurim for a second, the prayer books. Talking about allegories, the granddaddy of all allegories is the Song of Songs, written by King Solomon. Okay? Now here you're going to have to take my word for it, because this is the only part of the of the Art Scroll Siddur where there's no translation for it. Because it's so allegorical, and on a surface level, a little bit too brown paper wrapper for most Art Scroll readers, they didn't want to give it a straightforward translation. At any rate, it's page 299. In the first chapter of the Song of Songs, on page 299, for those of you who can read Hebrew, you'll follow along with me, it's Pasuk Yudalad. Eshkol HaKofer, Dodi li, B'char me Engedi. The end of that verse means, Dodi li, my beloved is to me, B'char me Engedi. In the vineyards of Engedi. Engedi, maybe some of you who visited Israel have been to Engedi. Most of you who climb Masada, part of that, tour Maslul, that route, is you go to an oasis in the southern desert in the Negev called Engedi. Okay? Ein means a wellspring. There's this wellspring, there's this beautiful well that makes this lush little garden in the middle of the desert. That's called Engedi. Okay? I'm sure you can hear the alliteratively Gedi and Gedi. Okay? So B'karmei Engedi, right? Our sages tell, where is Dodi li? Where is my beloved to me? Where do I commune with my beloved? If I, the Jewish people, am singing a song to God and God is my beloved, where do I commune with my beloved? In the temple in Jerusalem. And it's allegorically referred to over here as Ein Gedi, the wellspring of the goat, of the kid goat. Ein Gedi. So when it says Chad Gadya, it's a reference to the temple in Jerusalem.
So which is it?
What?
Which interpretation is the answer? They're very different.
Yes, they are. I'm not done. Listen to the whole poem from Rabbi Yaakov Lisi. He's got different interpretations on everything. So the first thing is the goat is the temple in Jerusalem. Okay? What's the cat? The cat is Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, the king of the Babylonian Empire, who destroyed the first temple. So we understand the cat that bites the goat is Nebuchadnezzar destroying the Beis HaMikdash. Who's Kalba? Who's the dog that bites the cat? The dog that bites the cat is Koresh, Cyrus. It's the Persian Median emperor. They supplanted the Babylonian Empire. And just as in world mythology, we have this legend of Romulus and Remus, founders of the Roman Empire, nursing from a she-wolf. Okay, the Talmudic sages had a legend of Cyrus, the Persian Median emperor, of him nursing from a dog. Hence he's known as the dog. Okay, so he's the dog who bites the cat. Who's the staff? The staff is the Greeks. And why is the imagery of the staff the Greeks? He just simply says, because their cultural imperialism was as coercive as knocking somebody over the head. It was so compelling, the appeal of their mythology and the appeal of their rationalism, their philosophy, and of their athleticism, their aesthetics. They coerced without coercion. They were like hitting people over the head, all their subject peoples, without having to hit them. What's the fire? The fire are the Jews again, the Hasmoneans, the Maccabees. The Maccabees were a family of Kohanim. Kohanim are the hereditary Aaronic priests who worked with fire in the temple. They're always bringing sacrifices. They also made a holiday that's associated with the kindling of lights, the kindling of fire. So in the imagery here, in the allegory here, the fire that burns the staff is the Hasmoneans, is the Chashmonaim. What's the water that extinguishes the fire? The Roman Empire. The Roman Empire roars throughout history like a tsunami, like the crash of waves. And therefore the imagery is water. What's the ox? The ox is the Arabs. And again, this one totally beats me. I don't know why in the world the Arabs are compared to an ox. Maybe straining, just to make things, work as they seem to be in history. And this is a part of history that's about to unfold. I don't see. You want to talk about the caliphates of the Middle Ages, Andalusia and the Iberian Peninsula. Maybe that's what he's referring to. I think what he's referring to is the global Islamification that we see, taking place before our eyes. I don't know if it's going to happen in our lifetimes or in our children's or our grandchildren's lifetimes. But if Mashiach doesn't come soon, I wouldn't be shocked if the United States of America is an Islamic country 80 or 90 years from now. Okay? That certainly seems to be the way the tide of history is moving right now. We're not going to be here to worry about it, but maybe our grandkids have to worry. At any rate, the Shochet is Mashiach ben Yosef, the same way as the Vilna Gaon said. So the last two over here are identical. I just want to end not with two more allegories. If anyone's interested, it's getting kind of late. I can give you Rabbi Heller's. I'll give it by the collation if anyone's interested. Still have to take some questions. But I want to end with two thoughts over here. Here's something very cute. Okay, let's go through our 10 steps again. All right? Working our way forward. Starting from verse 10, line 34. The goat was innocent, right? Let's not do any symbolism, any allegory. The goat is apparently a blameless, innocent goat. Right? So that makes the dog bad. Excuse me, the cat bad. Right? Cat's a bad guy. Right? That makes the dog a good guy. Okay? The dog is taking vengeance for the poor, innocent goat that was blameless and died anyway, so the dog's a good guy. The stick that hit the dog, bad guy. The fire that consumed the stick, good guy. The water that put out the fire, bad guy. The ox that drank the water, good guy. The slaughterer, bad. What does that make the angel of death?
Good.
So, I want to tell you one funny story and one beautifully insightful vart, and that'll be the end of tonight's class. Reb Nosson Adler was a great German sage of the 18th century. He was the much more famous Chassam Sofer's Rabbi. And he was run out of town, as often happens to rabbis and pulpits to this very day, by a tough board of directors. He was played to a tough crowd, no tougher audience than a synagogue full of Jews. Right? So he got run out of town. And he was in a nearby town where he wasn't well known, and he heard some local gossips talking about the I think it was Rabbi in Frankfurt on Main, if I'm not mistaken, talking lashon hara about him. They were speaking about what was wrong with Rabbi Adler and why the president of the community was right to throw him out. Maybe he wasn't right, maybe he was wrong, so on and so forth. So Rabbi Adler asked him the question I just asked you. Okay? Why is the Malach HaMavis getting it? He's apparently in the chain of events, in the chain of vendetta killings over here, right? He's on the side of right. He's one of the good guys. Why is he getting it? So I said like this, and I'll update his mashal a little bit. Right now, as we speak, much of New York is agog. The New York Rangers are meeting the New Jersey Devils. They're cross-Hudson rivals. And there's hockey fever going on in town. Now in hockey, there's a rule. Part and parcel of the sport of hockey. I don't know too much about hockey. I grew up in Southern California. We had no ice. We had no winters over there. But from what I'm told, okay, fighting is part and parcel of hockey. If at some point the hockey players don't throw down their sticks and throw off their gloves and start throwing some punches at one another, the crowd feels cheated. They feel they didn't get their money's worth. So fighting is okay in hockey. However, there's a rule that the third man into the fight, he goes to the penalty box. Okay, sometimes, it's a crime of passion, A guy checked you too hard against the board, you throw off your gloves, you throw a punch him. Okay, that's understandable. But a guy who's got no interest in the fight, he wasn't thrown into the boards, he didn't get, hit by the puck, he's going in and he's throwing a punch, that's a criminal. There's a guy who gets involved in a machlekes, that's a bad guy. Says Reb Nosson Adler, now I have the answer to the question I got you. Let's take a look again. Goat's innocent, right? Cat's bad. But the dog's the third man into the fight. The dog had no business going into the fight. Right? So now the dog's a bad guy. Right? So now the stick's a good guy. Now the fire's a bad guy. Now the water is good. Ox, bad. Slaughterer, good. Angel of death is bad again. Like we understand, the angel of death to be a universal criminal. Of course, now God is justified. God is good. Okay? And basically what he was telling him is, I had a fight in Frankfurt, and you guys got to gossip over it, you got to get involved. I was right, the president of the Kehillah was right. Well, what do you got to get involved for? Okay. Now, that was a little bit, it's a cute story, but it's tongue-in-cheek. But now let me tell you something that is a little bit more serious. I saw this in Rabbi Avram Shor, should be gesund. This is a great contemporary rabbi and lecturer. I think Torah Anytime has a lot of lectures from Rabbi Avram Shor, right? Yeah. On your database? Okay. Rabbi Avram Shor brings in his Haggadah, he brings this from a Chassidish Sefer, the Bris Avram, who brings it from a Sephardic Kabbalist by the name of the Maharash Al-Ghazi. The Maharash Al-Ghazi says a very interesting thing. This is where you see sometimes the seamless hole between the revealed part of the Torah and the hidden part of the Torah. We know that if you want to be Sabbath observant, there are 39 prohibited categories of creative activity, poorly translated as work, that we don't do on the Sabbath. One of these is shechting, slaughtering. Not allowed to slaughter an animal on Shabbos. You're really not allowed to draw any kind of blood. But what we call the Av Malacha, the paradigm, the archetype for that form of activity is slaughtering. So the Talmud asks the question, Shochet mishum mai machayev. Why is a shochet, why is a slaughterer considered to be desecrating Shabbos? What did he do wrong? In which way does he desecrate Shabbos? And the Gemara, the Talmud, entertains a possibility that it's because of tsoveya. Tsoveya means dyeing. Bringing color into, you take the raw wool, you put it in the dyeing pot, you adhere a color to the wool, that's called tsoveya, dyeing or painting or adding color. Okay, so the fact that the animal skin was brown or white or mottled, whatever it was. Okay, a Holstein cow, maybe it was half black, half white. And now you've left indelible redness throughout the area where you slaughtered the animal. That's in a certain sense, that's like tanning the hide. It's like coloring. You're coloring, you're dyeing. Just certainly if you took hair off a sheep, we call wool, and you added color to that, that's a desecration of Shabbos. This is also a desecration of Shabbos. Finally, the Gemara says, no, it's its own independent thing. It's called Netilas Neshama, causing cessation of life, of vitality. That's its own category of work. It's not a subdivision of one of the other categories of work. But at any rate, the Talmud entertains this possibility that it's because of tzoveya, because of coloring. Says the Maharash Al-Ghazi an amazing thing, based on this Talmud and the Rashi. Rashi says a very funny thing on that passage of the Gemara. Shochet mishum mai machayev. Why is a shochet chayev? Why do you desecrate Shabbos? Ashochet da alma kai, says Rashi. This is referring to shochtim in general. What is that supposed to mean? If I'm not a trained ritual slaughterer, if I'm a guy who just decides, who gets an urge, I need some fresh meat, and I slaughter an animal, I'm any less culpable on Shabbos? What does it mean, shochet da alma? So the way this Kabbalist interpreted the Gemara, the Rashi really, he's alluding to something deeper over here. He's asking the question of all questions. And it's not just in the Chad Gadya. Again, had there never been this liturgical poem. It's a big question in Jewish eschatology. Why is God going to conquer death? Why will mankind regain immortality? And why will there be, like I mentioned earlier in tonight's class, why will there be no Yetzer Hara, no inclination to evil for anything in the end of the day? It's all part of the same thing. Malach HaMavis, Yetzer Hara, Satan, the divine prosecuting attorney, the power that leads us to sin, death, according to the Talmud and Bava Basra, that's all one entity. But it's one entity that's doing its job. God wanted there to be temptation. Before Adam sinned, there was no death for humanity, but there was temptation. It was an external tempter. It was a snake. It wasn't our internal voice that we have in our minds and hearts that tells us to sin. But there was free will. There was temptation. And this angel of God, called the angel of death, the angel of the inclination to evil, has done a splendid job. God never had a more efficient worker. And the whole, the Lord of hosts, he's got tens of thousands of millions of angels. I don't know if there was ever an angel that executed its duties more faithfully and more doggedly and more incessantly. He's a machine, the Yetzer Hara. Well-oiled machine. Why does he deserve non-existence in the end of days? So Says the Marash Al-Ghazi, Mishum Tzaveya. He's disingenuous. He's a dyer. He's a painter. Okay? You ever take a jalopy and take it into Earl Scheib for a $59.99 paint job and say, make it look 10 years younger, I want to get another couple of thousand and some rube from out of town when I sell my used car? Maybe you never did it, but maybe you bought a car off the used car lot like that. It's very possible. Right? They take it to the body shop, they do a little external, oh, beautiful. Right? In modern Hebrew, I told you traditional Yiddish, we spoke about hypocrites, a chazafisel, the pig's foot. In modern Hebrew, the word for a hypocrite is tzavua. Someone painted, somebody colored. Okay? It's a coat of paint. It's external. You can't see what's going on the inside. If the Yetzer Hara, if the inclination to evil had truth in marketing, if he appealed to each and every one of us and said, listen to me, this is moral turpitude. What you're about to do is going to make you a bad person. But it's very enjoyable, nonetheless. It's a guilty pleasure, but don't ignore the guilt. That will be okay. The problem with the Yetzer Hara, says the Marash Al-Ghazi and the Chassidish Tzvarim, is Seveya. He colors things, he paints things. He makes bad neutral. He makes neutral good. He makes bad good. Okay? It's not an Aveira, it's a mitzvah. Rasul Salanti used to say. The Talmud says already, Kivin Sha'avar Adam Aveira V'Shana Ba Nas Like Ahater. When a person sins or repeats a sin, the taboo is off, it becomes as though it's permissible for him to do. Rasul Salanti added, and when a person does it a third time, now it becomes a mitzvah, now it becomes a holy cause. Right? People have to justify themselves. I can't be a bad person. If it's habitual behavior by me, it must be a great thing to do. Right? I've done it 3 times. It's got to be something praiseworthy. And that's not just us. That's our Yetzer Hara. That's our inclination to evil. That is the MO. That is how the inclination to evil operates. It's not bad. It's certainly not bad. Maybe a so-so. I'll tell you something. It's more than so-so. It's good. It's more than good. It's great. Okay? You're angry? You're jealous? No. Righteous indignation. Okay? Yeah. You're proud? You're haughty? No. It's healthy self-esteem. And so on and so forth. Right? There's very little that we do wrong in our lives that the Yetzer Hara isn't telling us incessantly, be in denial, it's good, it's good, it's good. And that's Sheikhet Mishum Mayim Achayev. Asakash Baruch Hu V'shachet L'mal Amavis. God comes and He slays the angel of death / the Yetzer Hara. Why is that? Because Mishum Tzeveya, because he was coloring, he was faking us out the whole time, and that was an abuse of his powers, and that's why he's got to go in the end of the days. May it happen speedily in our days. Our sages teach us, just as the Jews were redeemed the first time around from Egypt in the month of Nisan, so too when the Mashiach comes, it will be in the month of Nisan. May it happen even before this Pesach, so we can bring not an afikomen this year, we can actually bring a Paschal offering in Jerusalem. Amen. And I'll be able to take comments, questions, collations, all the comments. Go ahead.
I don't know if I'm saying it right. The Yetzer Hara too on Yom Kippur. What is he?
Takes the day off. I'm not being flip. I'm serious.
Isn't that why we have?
I'm sitting there. I'm serious. Our sages tell us that Hasatan, this Satan, is begematria, has the numerical value of 364. There are 365 days of the year. There's one day of a year where he's impotent, where he has no power at all. That's Yom Kippur. That is Yom Kippur.
He's praying on Yom Kippur too. Isn't he praying on Yom Kippur?